Welcome to Directionally Correct, a Felix podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, nobody.
There you go.
There we go.
I love it. Thanks to our sponsors, Lightcast. The world is full of talent data, but more data can lead to more questions, uncertainty, and stagnation as organizations sift through it to figure out what's fact from what's fiction. Lightcast talent intelligence platform answers your most difficult workforce questions to drive meaningful business results. With more than 20 years of experience as MC in Burning Glass, Lightcast accelerates your work, bringing together hundreds of billions of vetted, constantly updated data points and incredible insights to drive strategic talent decisions. Your organization can tap into the deepest open repository of skills, supply, and demand data in the world to transform your hunches into a skills-based future for your organization. Lightcast's flexible solution, used by 67 of the Fortune 100, can integrate your own data, be guided by in-house talent experts, and give you the tools and confidence to explore it for yourself. To learn more, book a demo at lightcast.io. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization. This is it.
Yeah, isn't this cool? So they took different measures of personality and predicted life outcomes with it, with Big Five scoring a medium correlation, 0.25.
Yeah, I
I
saw
think
this.
that's what it is. Big Four, no neuroticism. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
I hadn't seen it either, but
MBTI.
I think the Big Five without neuroticism's gotten some bad play because I guess some people think it's like a biased term or something like that. But yeah, the thing I see here is twofold. One, people poo poo on the MBTI all the time, and it's still got a correlation. It's not like it's non-existent. But also, the Big Five's not that great. You know?
The MBTI is like really eye-opening too. I mean, I know it's like kind of in vogue to like kind of shit on it from an IO perspective,
Yeah,
but I mean, from a marketing standpoint, as far as a lot of people use it,
they
and
have killed it, man. Killed
they
it.
have absolutely killed it. Everyone knows their little, 4-letter sign,
And the
and apparently
astrology
it's
people,
predictive of in some ways. It's predictive in some ways.
have killed their marketing too. It's the problem is
Yeah, good point. The
it's
astrology
just
people have
useless.
the world cornered, but
I mean, there's hippie girls everywhere that are subscribing to that. So, whatever.
uh, oh, I love it when you hear like someone like, "Oh, you're a Cancer. That means we can't vibe together." It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Like, I
What
wish
is
I
this?
knew more about it so I can make fun of it better.
I bet you like with the advent of the school calendar, I bet you there is some sort of validity to it. So people that are born in September are going to be older than the people that are born in May, right? Those
Yeah, I mean, there's like a life stage component to it because of the school year. I could see that. You know what I was thinking about the other day? And I'm sure there's an answer to this, but I just don't know it. Is does every month have like the same proportion of kids born in that month as every other month?
I
Like, or
thought
are there
we
certain months where there's like no kids born?
I thought we covered something similar of like what are the odds that you share a birthday with somebody else? And the
Yeah, but
odds
not the birthday because like 365 days, that's too much compression. I want to bend them in the months.
the point I'm making is like certain days how have people born more often because of
Yeah,
what happened like 9 months previously. So you would expect, like say
sure.
September, to have more births because people get together on New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve. That was kind of where my thought process was. But I just wonder, like, are there certain months where people don't, procreate, right? And then that means that 9 months later that there's no kids born in that month. Like, let's just say it's whatever. Like New Year's is going to make kids in September. Does that mean that January is like a down month, and so no kids are born in October? Like, I don't know.
I think there's a reason to celebrate every month, which means there's a reason for guys and girls to get together.
Eh, I bet you there's more kids born around Mardi Gras in Louisiana, or like because of
N
Mardi Gras or something. I
9
don't know.
months later, would that be, like, November? No, that'd be wild. Like,
Yeah.
can you
I think
pinpoint the Mardi Gras effect in birth?
see, there's a study to be had right there, in demographics, but I bet you it's like December or January, depending on the year, because Mardi Gras adjusts every year because it's like a religious holiday. Um,
Well, I mean, it just makes good sense then. But yeah, there's definitely like a maturity factor in when people are born in the year, and that could affect their personality. So, like, if you're the first to have a driver's license every year, or like you're the biggest and strongest, sports star in your, fourth grade class or whatever, that's going to change your personality. And I wonder if I don't know my zodiac signs, but I wonder if people in September are considered, they're the dominant personality, and
I bet you so. I mean, that's well, I think astrology predates the school year, but I bet you it has an effect
exactly.
nowadays. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was saying earlier, as far as, like, since the school year has been adopted, have we
Yeah.
seen a kind of change? Not that I think that people, change their zodiac sort of predictions.
Well, one thing I was thinking about in kind of preparation for the podcast today, like when you're in graduate school and there's certain times where you're just so deep in all the work that you're doing, you kind of feel like like everything. Like I feel like the people who I meet the most nowadays that think they know everything are graduate students. And so I was wondering, is there anything, whether it be like IO psychologists or just people analytics folks in general, that when they leave school that they don't know that they should know, like from your perspective?
Well, first off, I think the grad students do know everything from an IO perspective, like,
They
when you
do.
talk to them. Like, when I was going through comprehensive exams, I was so on top of my game. I knew 500 citations, no big deal, right?
Yeah.
And, like, you talk to the grads, they're on top of the research, I'll put it that way. But I think what
Hmm.
you're getting at is far as what are job skills, like, on the job skills, right?
Yeah. And it could be like technical skills, it could be non-technical skills, like it could just be wisdom, right? Like things that they don't know in that regard. But is there anything that, from the outside in? Like I went to this event the other night and there were some junior people in their career speaking at the event. And I swear they thought they were in like IO, like oral comprehensive exams, giving their answers, and I was like, "God, this is so boring. Why don't you just say what you really think based on like, what's going on in the world in 2024, not because you cited some article from 1980."
So just actually use your brain. Well, I mean, you say that, like, there's IO things, and then there's, like, just research things, and there's just, like, business things. From a business perspective, just just say what you mean in an email. Like, just get to the
Yeah,
point. You don't have
short
to
emails.
write 10 paragraphs. If you do have to write 10 paragraphs, and it happens every so often, put it in a document, and we'll have a meeting with it later, or something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, you don't
Or,
need to do that.
send 10 emails over a spaced out period of time with one paragraph each. Like there's no need to put 10 paragraphs.
The lack of appetite to read is phenomenal in a lot of organizations. So you put a document in front of people and they're like, "What the fuck is this? Like, I need a PowerPoint. Someone needs to, like, present this to me." Yet at the same time, they'll get these emails that are like 4 pages long. No problem, well, who knows if they actually read it, but no problem receiving that and just signing off on that sort of, orientation.
Yeah. What I think about too is like a lot of emails get read while somebody's multitasking.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
we know the
yeah.
research on multitasking, so it's gotta be short, sweet, and to the point.
I need my, like, 180 character tweet email format, right? We can't
Yeah,
be
for
can't be
sure.
doing that. I think that from, like, a broader perspective, like, things that I would tell a grad student coming out of school that they wouldn't necessarily get in school is the business needs insights, and they need them rapidly. So it's great to run all the crazy analyses. It's great to go super in depth. Sometimes the world really calls for that. But a leader needs insights now, directionally correct insights now, not in 6 months after you've done all this sort of stuff. So, in a lot of cases, 80% is good enough. 80% is good
Yeah,
enough. If you need to go deeper later, we'll go deeper later if there's juice to do so.
that makes perfect sense. It's like the system of incentives is all off. Like grad school, the incentive is to make things as complex as possible,
Yeah,
and the real world
absolutely.
is to make things as simple and quick as possible. And those two things come into conflict.
It's amazing, the lack of because like in academia, you're dealing with a bunch of people that are, reading the same sort of stuff, and everyone knows what a correlation is or the basic orientation to it. You get in the real world, like, people don't know what a t-test is. They
Yeah,
might know how to use the term correlation, but what it actually means in practice when you see, like, we'll say, like, a
yeah,
negative 0.25, that can be mind-bending to the regular folk.
yeah. Well, and they know the colloquial term of correlation, and they know the colloquial term of statistically significant, but they don't know what it means. Right.
Yeah, I love it. I see it every so often where someone will hold up, like, "They found significant results here."
Hmm.
It's
It
like,
was so
yeah,
significant.
if you really knew what the difference in distributions were between significant and non-significant, you would not really be that impressed.
Ooh, this is significant. Yeah. No,
W w
I had
women
a thought on
women
this.
scored like a 0.65, men scored a 0.63. That's significant difference. It's like,
Ooh,
yeah, there you go.
talk significant to me. Oh, yeah.
This is getting weird now.
This is weird. No, I was thinking about it as like there's basic stuff. Like a lot of programs don't even teach people Excel, right? Like just knowing how to run like a
Yeah.
pivot table in Excel or like some basic, SQL if queries, like things like that. But
I
the
think
other
that's
thing,
I think that both of those are really apt. I mean, let's unpack them both real quick.
yeah,
Uh granted, I think the world's moving towards sort of like programmatic languages because, say, like SPSS, it's really expensive license, and if you have like free tools like R, Python, it becomes more cost effective to be able to do it. Plus, they're more versatile. But I get the point and click nature. But with that said, Excel, you can do a lot in Excel, especially if you know it really, really well,
yeah.
right?
Well, and like the whole Microsoft suite has gotten even more advanced than just Excel too, but I don't want to like give them an advertisement. And then SQL is like or related languages for just querying data. Because what life is like in the real world versus in graduate school. Graduate school, you're either going out and collecting data yourself or you have this, curated data set that you've been given. Where
Hmm.
in the real world, you got to get data out of like databases and data warehouses and this junk. And you got to figure out ways of manipulating it and all that stuff. And so it's very different.
You can buy a lot of cred too with folks in the organization just by learning some minor SQL syntax. So I'm talking select, even like a dummy table name and like kind of the sort of filters that you want to put on there. So like if you got to go to like a data guy and say like, here, will you pull this data from me for me? And at least can provide them a basic outline of what you want. They're going to be much more willing to help you out than like if you got to go iterative with them.
Oh
Totally.
yeah. Well, and they're gonna be like, "This is one of my people." You know,
We got a nerd. We found a nerd.
we found one of us. Yeah. No. That was kind of on the technical side. On the like the non-technical side, I just thought like about how businesses make money. Right. Like I don't think
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
actually think about that or know that. And I don't really even mean it in like you have to become a finance person. I mean like, have you done a ride along with somebody who actually does what your business does to know how they work and like how they add value to the customers or partners or whatever of the organization? And then the other one was just generic public speaking. And when I mean public speaking, I don't mean like at a microphone in front of 1,000 people, giving a valedictorian speech. I really just mean like you're in a meeting, you have something to say. can you say it, kind of to the email point? Can you say it quickly and concisely and not sound like an idiot, right? Public
I
speaking in general is just vastly underrated.
I think that both of these are really critical. The customer obsession or just understanding
Mhm.
the organization is absolutely critical, and I think that's where just conducting like I don't not even like job analysis, but going and doing some qualitative interviews every so often with folks, just understand how they operate or just observing them. This sort of stuff is
Yep.
super valuable to inform how your insights will be used or the sort of things that are practical or impractical for your organization and can actually be implemented. Um, I don't think we do enough of it. I think it's getting harder and harder as we become more kind of a remote based or hybrid sort of based
Yeah.
society. But public speaking, yeah, if you need to be able to say something, uh, you got to be able to present it very clearly. I am not one of those people, by the way. Luckily,
You can't speak or you can speak.
I don't do a good job anymore. Like, I don't have opportunities to publicly speak anymore, and I'm okay with that. Really.
Well, I don't mean it like a conference. I mean,
Oh,
you're in a
you're just
meeting.
talking about like clearly communicating your point of view.
Clearly communicating, but in likely in a room. And what I meant public speaking is just to kind of ratchet up one notch of like maybe your boss is there, maybe your boss's
Oh,
boss is
oh.
there, right? Like there's a little bit of pressure on you, right? It's not like you're just talking to your best friend at happy hour. Like a little bit more of okay, I need to be able to speak in a way where I don't sound silly.
I'm curious how the world's gonna turn when like Gen Z comes in the world and they
They're already
became
there, man.
they
They're already
become the
there.
executives
Well,
and they're like preach king. Let's do this.
I mean, maybe that's what they'll do, or maybe the world will beat them down and their soul will be crushed out of them before they get there, like most people. I don't know.
Bet. No capping. No cap.
That's right. That just what Scott said.
Well, I think increasingly you need to I'm not saying that they're Luddites or anything like that, but I see people that are like shy away from like Gen AI or LLMs or don't really see the value in it. Is like if you're not on the train right now, you need to get on the train like yesterday because like that's the way the future's going, and it makes your life so much easier in a lot of respects. Not all respects. Some tasks are better for it than others, but you need
Yeah.
to learn how to use the technology.
I want to put a pin in that just for a second because we'll come back to that in one of the articles that I've got to talk to you about today. I don't know if I sent it to you or not, but there's something related to that I'll probably bring back up later if that's okay. But
Well, we'll see. I'll see if I'll allow it
we'll
later.
see. Okay. Well, I wanted to come back though to something you mentioned, like when you were doing comps, you had like 500 articles at your disposal that you could just reference at any
Oh
time.
yeah, absolutely.
Is like I thought one of the things we want to talk about today was just kind of like what are some of those articles that we found formative? Maybe they're overlooked. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on, what are some of the obscure things that we knew back in the day that we still think really influence us today?
I don't know if I would take it in this direction. These are and it's not entirely not aligned with what you're saying. I'm going with sort of things that I found interesting results, but
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily super impactful.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
so one of them was we all hate daylight savings time. Leap forward, right? You
Yeah. Yeah.
lose
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
hour of sleep the next day. This article using the depleted ego framework showed that the day after, I think it was 2012, the day after leap year, they measured cyber loafing in organizations and found that people spent like twice as much time cyber loafing as they did the previous Mondays or the Monday afterwards. So, quite literally, people like just like soothing themselves. They're unable to concentrate in their office setting.
That's so wild considering today is the day after leap day. Right now.
Is it though?
Yeah. Yesterday was leap day. I don't even know if you knew that.
Well, I feel like I'm cyber loafing right now, right? But I mean, it kind of gets to like there's external things that impact your productivity, right? And it could be exogenous factors like say
Mhm.
daylight savings. It could be like more proximal, such as you're overly caffeinated, as I am now. You
Yeah,
know
that's interesting. What others do you have?
what else you got? What else you got? Um, Bosco, I think it's 2015, released an effect size article.
Uh-huh.
So we're all told like Cohen's effect sizes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like point 0.2 is small and point
Mhm.
0.5 is sort of medium, point 0.8 is really large. And essentially, Bosco breaks down the effect sizes and says for certain variables, yeah, that's a line. But for others, you're never going to get an effect size that big. So it's never going to reach a large effect size. So a whole bunch of different sort of things from job satisfaction, et cetera, and just kind of list out better ranges to really expect from your data in a meta-analytic framework. Which it's like okay, it's a much more nuanced view than these sort of just like general guidelines on effect
Yeah.
sizes.
I think I actually remember coming across that. That was a good one, and
That's
it's
it's a big one. It's a big
yeah,
article. Yeah,
yeah.
it's by no means obscure, but it's definitely informative. And I hope and I wonder if there's other sort of things out there that are kind of the same way, where we have these like general conventions, such as reliability of assessments.
Mhm.
Like,
Point 8.
b- b- yeah, but point 0.7 on the low end, point 0.8 is
Yeah.
like for these higher level things. And granted, we know how these sort of things are calculated and the intercorrelations, et cetera. But is it acceptable in every sort of circumstance to just like rely on a point 0.7 or point 0.8 standing? Because some people just like kind of treat that like a mantra, almost like correlation does not equal causation, which is one of the most. That's one of my pet peeves.
Overused things
Yeah,
that get
it's
said.
I hate that. I hate that saying so much because, yeah, it's true. Like storks don't bring babies in the springtime. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because, like, back to your point, people are probably nailing in September or whenever. But you can't have causation without correlation either.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's my thought on it. I actually don't think most people know what it takes to prove causality. Like, and you know what step 1 for proving causality is? Is there a correlation?
Is there a relationship?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then this, step 2 is does A always become before B and B doesn't come before A, so time sequence. Third is the kind of the is there a theoretical basis for why this should happen, right? And
This
so
is I think that's where like the economists get lost in a lot of cases. Like they will
yeah.
control for all sorts of things and set up all other sequences, but lack that theoretical foundation to like why would this logically occur? Like just because it's occurring doesn't mean it's
Yep.
logical.
And then the last is ruling out alternative hypothesis, which you could argue you could never prove causality because you can never rule out every other alternative hypothesis in history. But once you've gotten to a certain point, you can, reasonably say this is causal.
I think Cole's been doing some research on causal research lately.
Actually, I wrote an article about it like 2 years ago, but it all stuck with me because because of my annoyance with the phrase, well, correlation doesn't equal
Yeah.
causation. Well, correlation doesn't equal causation. It's like, you don't even know what causation is.
Here I'll rattle through a couple of these more
Sure.
quickly. Campion, we had Campion on like over the summer. Profiles in quitting. So people don't just like quit all for all the same reason. So some people leave because like they're forced out. Some people leave because they're like terrible people. Some people leave because they're not terrible people, but they're terrible at their job rather. Some people leave because there was like a big episode, like their boss blew up at them and they just kind of left. So it's kind of the differences in how you would predict turnover. Timothy Judge's Big Five and general mental abilities impact on career success.
I remember that. That's a
That's
good
a
one.
big one. I think it's shit. That's got to have like 10,000 citations or something like that. It's a big one. And I can't actually locate this article, but I saw it forever ago, and I thought it was wildly fascinating. So what they did is they took if you have like a big auditorium lecture, just a
Yeah.
ton of seats. We'll call it 100, call it 500. It doesn't really matter. They noted where certain students sat in the auditorium, and people sit in the same seats every day. They almost like claim it, right?
Yeah.
So one day they sent in a Confederate to sit in those seats that those people sat in, to forcing them to move. And the next class period, they measured how early those students showed up to reclaim their seats, and they were showing like 10 minutes earlier to get their seat. So
Oh,
people, like, despite the fact, this relates to open office seating too. I mean, it's
yeah.
directly related. So people have ownership over these open seating, no assigned seating sort of areas,
I
and
think I'm gonna
they will
side I'm gonna
reclaim them.
side I'm gonna side with the people who show up early, you know?
You want your seat. You're gonna get your seat.
Well, not just I like human beings need like a little bit of homeostasis, right? They need a little bit of like, all right, at least I don't have to choose a seat today. Like, but
One fewer
somebody's
choice.
yeah, just like come on, remove a little bit of the cognitive load, like the ego depletion stuff you were saying earlier, right? Remove a little bit from this life. At least I don't have to think about where I'm going to sit today. And then somebody sits in my fucking seat. I'm like, God, just do me a favor, please.
People crave consistency too, right? Like
Mhm.
if you like view the world from like two seats over, your entire dynamic is different, right? The
Yep,
world just looks totally different.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I think that's a great. If I hope that I can actually locate that article again, because it was absolutely fascinating.
You know, I think the articles that I found were I was like, I was meant to be in people analytics just
Oh
from
yeah,
looking at them. Yeah, because a lot of them were really kind of the precursors to people analytics existence. Like I remember there was the 95 one from Mark Huslett about high performance work systems and their effect on firm performance. I was like, I remember
what does
some of
that
our
mean? What does that mean? What's a high performance work system?
it was like basically like we would call it in the workplaces like strategic talent management practices
Okay,
and how
okay.
they impact firm performance. And I remember some of our professors even like were like poo pooing on it. They're like, "That's dumb." I was like, "Oh no, I like this. This is good." And then like there was the competing on talent analytics. That was kind of the creation of people analytics with Davenport and Shapiro. There's this isn't even an academic article, but it came out in Fast Company in 2005. I just love it. I read it like once every 2 years. It's called Why We Hate HR. It's a fantastic article if you ever read it, but it's
Why
like
why
really
why
good.
do we hate HR?
I mean, I think you could come up with a few reasons, but it's a lot about like how HR people lack self awareness about how what they're doing impacts people, and they're like, "Why do they hate us?" It's like, well, because you're
Well,
doing
I mean, this is great. 360 back to what you're talking about earlier.
yeah,
Knowing your customer, knowing your folks
yep.
is super critical to actually implementing or having any sort of impact on the business. If you want to improve workers' lives, you need to know about
Mhm.
them, right? This is why
Yep.
people hate HR. Or like typically HR will also like hand down some like sort of, I don't know, fluffy sort of things like, oh, we
Yep.
need to all concentrate on getting
And
along
people
together.
this is actually one of the central themes of the article is like people just wanna do their jobs.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah, yeah.
taking people away from their jobs to that you think that'll make them more satisfied with doing their jobs. Like, no, I just wanna freaking do my job. Just let me do my job.
I just want to go home. Like, why are we
Yeah,
doing this?
exactly. And the last one I found, I actually couldn't find it, but there was like this precursor article that one of my favorite people analytics books is Investing in People by John Boudreau and Ed Lawler and Wayne Cashew. And then a later version, Alexis Fink ended up helping with. But there was a
Lexus.
precursor series of articles that those guys wrote that were really good that I remember reading back in the day. And I was like, this is really good stuff.
And what was that related to?
Investing in People.
Oh,
It's a very prominent book. It's like kind of like some of the calculations. It shows a bunch of calculations about how you prove the value of human capital, and that's again that's much of a theme of my interest in this space of like IO psychology, but also people analytics.
we need to get John Boudreau on the podcast. He does some really cool stuff and like really kind of future oriented things that would be
I'm actually
really.
loving his fashion choices nowadays. I don't know if you ever seen him around.
I've seen him at a couple of different conferences, but what was he rocking these days?
He's definitely rocking a cowboy vest, you know?
Oh,
I've seen it
oh.
2 or 3 times where he's going cowboy vest. I'm like, "Alright, that's a bold fashion choice."
Is he going to like Bandolero too?
I don't know what a bandolera is.
Isn't that the little like the tie that's just two
Oh, yeah.
strings with like a little nugget in the
So I
middle?
think one of the times he did wear that. I always thought that was called a bolo tie.
Oh, you're right. I think a bandolero is actually like the bullet things that the like Mexican outlaw will wear in
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah.
Western.
Yeah. But I've seen him in the bolo tie, yes. And it's also it's a bold fashion move if you don't have on cowboy boots.
Like got like Dockers on and
Yeah. It's
like
like, "Alright, this is what we're
topsiders.
doing now." But yeah, he's an interesting guy, and, yeah, like any of those guys. I think Ed Lawler's retired now, and I don't know what Wayne Cassia is doing, but he wrote some big book that we had to
Hey,
read in grad school. I can't remember what it was, but he was like a big name.
yeah, Casio and Guinness. It's a yellow book on the entire eye side, really.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it. It's like selection and personnel and selection or something like that.
Yeah, that's probably what yeah, I remember that.
I love walking through all the conferences and seeing the different fashion styles. So like I love a good variance in it too. So like I'm gravitating towards more casual now. Like I don't even know if I'm gonna wear a button up to psyop this year. I brought like three last year and just wound up wearing my Patagonia every day anyway.
Yeah, I was
Um,
like, what do you wear other than Patagonia shirts?"
I wear a Patagonia vest or a cowboy vest. Uh, but then you got like dude that wears like a bow tie, or
Yeah,
dude that will like do a necktie, but do like the Trinity knot. This like I'm sure takes like 2 hours to actually
yeah,
make.
I know what
It's
you're
like
saying.
wow, you're way more into this than I would be.
You could ask Tillman though. I used to be bow tie guy, so I have to wear that. I have to live with that.
There's photos that exist.
There's photos that exist. I was very much that guy.
I have a seersucker suit with like a blue bow tie that I could wear with it, and maybe I'll go to Kentucky Derby this year or something. I don't know what to do with
Or
it.
you wear it to psyop. It's a good conversation starter. I'll tell you that.
Maybe maybe on our panel.
maybe I'll,
Maybe on
maybe
our
on a
panel.
live podcast. Yeah,
I don't know if I could fit in it anymore, honestly.
gotta lose a little weight.
It is time to start doing the psyop weight loss
Yeah,
sort
do
of
some
regiment, right?
call them psyop sit ups. You know.
Psyop sit-ups.
Yeah.
I was like, you gotta like figure out how you're gonna glad hand all day and shit.
Yeah, man. Oh gosh.
I love your list of articles that influenced you, and I think that we give this segment an A+. That's what I'm gonna say.
I think we rated on a scale of 0 to excellent or whatever you always say when people leave the podcast.
What not annoys me, but what tickles me is that how few people like point that out, even like psychometric folks,
Yeah.
because they're not expecting it, they're not viewing it, they just like oh it's so great. It's
Oh,
like
I promise. I think about it every time you do it. Like, what is he doing?
I want to know if they're gonna point it out. So maybe we're giving something away here.
Maybe so.
Good.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to get to the point basically where if somebody's not already a fan of the pod, I don't really want them on as a guest because they got to get what we're about.
They
They
gotta
have to
get it.
understand the confusion matrix and the Waffle House and the nerdery. And I get tired of explaining that to people. I'm like, come on, everybody else is listening. You should be listening.
They gotta get with this like solid banter here about bow ties. They gotta understand what's up.
Got some quality bow tie material. Yeah.
Uh, but I know that you have in the past had many roles, right?
Yeah.
Eh,
I switched jobs like hotcakes. I don't know if that's an expression, but
That's
that's something
that is a
that happens for sure.
weird. But I mean, along with all this job hopping comes a lot of knowledge on how to actually get a job, right?
Yeah. But that's one thing I guess I did want to talk about at some point is just what the job search experience is like in 2024. Because it's changed a lot. I remember as a person who's moved jobs quite a few times and been looking. I've seen each of the epochs of what it was like getting a job in people analytics. I mean, there was a extended period of time where it was hot, 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 hot.
Yeah.
You put yourself out there, you get a lot of different companies that are interested in you. It was relatively easy to move up quickly if that was an interest of yours, or to go into deep subject matter expertise if that was an interest. And right now, it's tough. It's tough out there for people. Like, I know so many people that reached out to me at one point or another that are either confidentially looking, quietly unemployed, And so one of the things that I really appreciated, though, I'll call it like post layoffs, is how the people analytics community has rallied around helping each other.
Mm.
And that has been quite heartwarming. And so I was really appreciative of a few people. Like the role I'm in now, frankly, came because of a recommendation of an old connection that I had that used to work at the organization. And it was not publicly posted when they let me know, and they just gave me a heads up, and I was really grateful for that. And a lot of the people I know who have landed good gigs, it was something like that. And so I'll say one of the pieces of feedback I've given to people a ton in my career is like, a lot of, people always tell you it's all about networking. And I was like, I never get jobs through networking. It never happens. But that was because the field was really hot. Right now, networking is really important. And so I'd say that, yeah, getting the right connections with the right people and having that kind of stuff has paid huge dividends. And I actually thank this podcast. Thank you. I mean, you've been really kind to me over some of these times I've been looking for jobs. And yeah, I mean, it's good to be in the role I'm in now. But yeah, I think it's really cool to see how the people analytics community is rallying around each other, and just especially some of the few key like prominent members out there that are really giving back. And so I got to call myself one of those members for a while now, but it was good to kind of be on the other end of it for a little bit.
It's good to hear that the community's working, right? I mean, it's a social support system as much as it is an information sharing and professional network, right?
It absolutely.
Um, with that said, like, how would you coach up someone that wanted a job right now? Like, say, in the past, or I guess it depends on the level of role you're trying to go to, etc. But should they be shotgun blasting resumes across the world, or would you say just only focus on networking?
I mean, I just always tell people you got to do everything,
Yeah.
right? I'll say like that certain things have more efficacy than others, but sometimes lightning strikes no matter what you're doing, right? And so I mean, I blast just as much as the next person. Sometimes
it's
it
gonna
works.
it's gonna be way easier if you have an in, right? You
Yeah.
become a known commodity. You became a friend of a friend, and there's also like really good evidence that you're gonna be a whole lot like the people in that company
Hmm.
if you get reference, right? So it's like,
Correct.
oh, we know Cole is a fantastic worker, and if he recommends somebody, that person's likely to have the same skills or demeanor, or Cole sees something in them that we can appreciate and will use here at this organization.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I mean, that's like what a lot of people say there's efficacy in referrals, right? Is because of PO fit, PJ fit, like that kind of stuff. And I think the things that I'll say one thing that I've gotten really much better on over the last few years that I used to completely neglect is like a sub variant of networking, which is I'll call like I used to know just a lot of people who did people analytics,
Yeah.
but here's the crazy thing. People who do people analytics, unless you're earlier in your career, are not the ones who hire you. It's
No.
people who lead people analytics. Like, and so maybe it's an HR business partner, maybe it's head of people operations, maybe it's head of total rewards, maybe wherever people analytics reports into, knowing those people actually helps way more when you're trying to find some of these roles than necessarily just having a really robust people analytics network. And I think that's definitely helped pay off dividends for me in my old role, but also in the recent job search as well.
Well, it makes total sense, right? You're just getting more proximal to the actual source of the hiring manager, right?
Yep, exactly.
I see these sort of like TikToks and stuff online where someone will say like, "I've applied to 500 jobs and I didn't get a single call back," which I mean, that makes sense on a lot of levels. Like, so especially if you're early career, like your resume is probably going to get weeded out because you're
Yeah.
competing against people that are later in the career, this sort of thing.
Yep.
But if you don't follow it up with, meeting somebody in the company or trying to network on top of it to like get your resume pushed to the top of the pile, it's going to be really tough. So you need to talk to people. You need to talk to a variety of people too. To your to
Yeah.
your point.
Yeah, and, I and there's something to be said about like, I hear this a lot when people are doing, like, research on, like, gender biases and stuff like that, where they'll say, like, female candidates sometimes won't go for jobs that they're qualified for if they don't meet all the criteria, where,
Yeah.
male candidates will go for jobs even if they meet none of the criteria. And and I feel like there's, like, a happy medium in between those 2, which is, like, the jobs that you get the most callbacks for are the ones that you're very close to, but not completely at in your career stage. And what I mean by that is people don't like it when you're like way too overqualified. People don't like
Yeah.
it when you're way too underqualified. But if you're just almost qualified, that's when you're going to be in that kind of sweet spot. Right. Um, the other thing I'll say, and this is just a funny aside, I was talking to somebody who I know and respect, and I was telling him how, yeah, man,
What
job
was it,
search
me?
market.
Were you
No,
talking to me? Oh,
I said somebody I respect.
exactly.
That was like, man, that job search that was a little tougher than usual. And they're like, oh yeah, all the good people I know, they found jobs immediately. It's only the ones who suck who had a hard time. And I was like, you ass.
What a dig.
I was like, well, I guess I'm a B player then. Sorry, but yeah.
It's a desperate time when you don't have a job and you need one, right?
Oh,
It's and
absolutely.
the job hunting process just kind of sucks because you don't know where it's going to come from. Which
Well,
is where like Matthew Jackson he talks about with the strength of weak ties in
yeah.
his book, and then there's also a book called Strength of Weak Ties. But you're most likely to find a job from someone you don't talk to on a weekly or monthly basis, just because
Well,
they have access to diverse sets of information that you don't.
and the other thing too is the job market itself, and I'm just talking about people analytics here, is very imbalanced. And what I mean by that is there's way more job seekers for people in cities where a bunch of layoffs occurred or for
Yeah,
remote jobs because
yeah,
people don't want to relocate. But the cities where companies are still hiring for people analytics jobs are generally not the same cities where those layoffs were happening. And so there's like a surplus of talent in some markets and a complete,
yeah,
devoid
yeah.
of talent in other places. But the market won't fix itself because the people, they don't want to relocate or they want a remote job. And a lot less of the jobs now are remote jobs.
That's a really interesting aspect to the pandemic or the aftermath of the pandemic, where it looked like a lot of jobs are just going to be remote forever.
Yeah.
But it sounds like those are drying up and they're becoming very competitive and, fewer and far in between, clearly, right?
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in other people. This is not something I personally experienced, but I talked to somebody that they had like let's call it a metaphorical Bay Area job at
Yeah.
big name tech company. They moved to Montana or
Yeah.
to, Costa Rica or, some like kind of desirable location to do work. Then they get laid off. But then they say, there's no way I'm moving back to the metaphorical Bay Area. So now I have to get a remote job. And then they're like, all the remote jobs or not all of them, but like a significant portion are gone. And they're like, what do I do now? And I'm like, you live in Montana. Like,
You wrangle cattle. That's what
yeah,
you
like, yeah.
do because that's where the jobs are.
They say, when you, do as the locals do. I don't know. Like, it's not
Start
people's
your own
way.
company.
Yeah.
Start your own company if you wanna, like, really live in Montana. I mean, there is a transient sort of need in a lot of cases, right? There's a reason why a bunch of tech companies relocated to the Bay Area a long time ago because it's
Yeah.
mutually beneficial, and they share their
Yep.
talent, and you kinda get it's why people go to Hollywood to become a star, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't just be like, I'm a remote star in Sheboygan.
I look really good on Zoom meetings,
I don't. That's one of my problems.
I don't look good anywhere, but,
I have a story about how not to apply to a job, or at least how to how you can annoy someone while applying for a job.
I would love
So
to hear it. What is it?
I get requests fairly regularly to say, like, from people like, "Hey, I applied for a job at your company. Will you
Mhm.
talk to the recruiter and just like tell them like, hey, I'm a good person." And just like put
I've been meaning to stop doing that, Scott, I'm sorry.
I like, Cole, you can't do this anymore. You can't do this anymore. Um, so I get these fairly regularly, and I'm pretty, if they're gonna actually contact me, I probably know them pretty well.
Yeah.
And I contact the recruiter and I say like, hey, look out for Cole Napper. He's been applying, and like
Mhm.
pull his resume out the top of the thing and just take a look at it. And that's generally the end of the transaction. But this one day, this person emails me. Dude, I know somewhat well. Haven't talked to him in several years, but whatever. But I know him, and like, hey, I applied, whatever. So I contact the recruiter and I'm like, hey, do this sort of thing. And they reply back and they're like, this person doesn't have a resume. Is it under a different name or something like that? So like, oh, that's really weird. So I go and I contact that person, and they say like, I haven't applied for the job. I was like,
What?
oh, okay. Like you told me to contact the recruiter. Like, what the fuck? And he says,
Yeah.
well, do you think I should apply? I'm like,
Yes.
if you want the fucking job, then yes, you should apply. And I never heard anything else. That was the end of that transaction. It's like, okay, never again, never again.
Okay, let's talk about this for a second because I had this happen a lot too. Because again, to what I was saying earlier about a lot of people get the wisdom given to them that networking is the key to finding a job, but they misinterpret in their mind what that relationship looks like. So
Yeah.
here's the magical thinking that some people think. I met Scott at a party or a conference or whatever. I know Scott now. There's a role at his company. I tell Scott I'm interested in his company. I get role. There's no like intermediate steps between like applying for a job or interviewing or negotiating your salary or or going on site or doing a presentation or like none of that stuff. Just I know Scott, I get role. And I promise you, a lot of people think that's how the world works because I guess there's this notion that there's like these under the table jobs. Somebody even called it, there was this like trend on LinkedIn a while back that I think they were calling it quiet hiring, where like people just get jobs and nobody gets notified of it. It's like, that's not real. It's not a real thing. Like people, like no one gets a job without interviewing, no one gets a job without applying. It doesn't happen.
I think that if it does happen, it happens at the highest levels of the organization, unfortunately, right? Where senior leaders can just willy nilly
But
put people in place.
see, but I've gotten even closer to this, and even in those cases, it doesn't go through formal procedures. It goes through informal procedures, and
Yeah.
sometimes informal procedures can be even more rigorous and expansive than formal procedures. And so, like, I agree that it does happen, but the informal networking part of it can even be even worse, and I would even argue way more biased because what
Oh,
happens is
absolutely.
a lot more back channeling and like digging into people's pasts, like things that wouldn't pass the smell test from a legal standpoint happen all the time at the executive level.
Well, when you get that, plus you also have like a situation where people will reform another company that they were all previously at in the current
Yep.
company, right? It's
Yep.
like, oh, I'm going to bring in Joe because he was at IBM. I'm going to bring in Steve because he was at IBM. I'm going to bring in Diana because she was at IBM. Next thing you know, you got IBM at your
Yep.
company.
I've had that happen to me at multiple places. it, uh,
So there is a way to network and there is a way to apply for a job, and it's tough out there for a fella or a
it's
gal.
tough at the moment, but I'm hoping, you know, hope against hope here, but I'm hoping that it gets better soon. So it's not such a big deal, but who knows?
You want to do a little confusion matrix?
Let's do it, man. The confusion matrix.
So you came up with this,
Did
didn't
I?
you? Well, I don't know if you came up with it, but you found
Oh,
it
yeah, I
anyway.
do remember this now. I forgot about this.
Good, because I haven't looked at it either. This is gonna be shocking for both of us. It's gonna be
Do
very
you want me to pull
confusing.
it up? I can actually pull
Yeah,
it up.
pull it up.
Okay.
So you found this timeline of historical figures, when they lived and when they died, and it puts everyone into perspective. And there's a lot of information here. There's a lot to dig
I
through.
mean, there's hundreds of names on here,
Yeah,
and it extends from 1200 through the present day, the year 1200 through the present day. So a lot of different lifetimes over like hundreds of leaders.
hundreds of leaders. my
I
favorite
mean,
leader, my favorite leader on here is Eminem.
so there's artists, there's business and industry, thinkers, entertainers, athletes, writers, leaders, and baddies, and events slash eras.
This is so small I can barely see it. I don't have the
Yeah,
link in front of me. But I fixated on Shakespeare because I figured like Shakespeare would be, analogous to like, I don't know, when Jesus walked the earth, a kid, of course.
yeah.
But I mean, like to put people into their historical context of like being around when like Henry VIII was around, but not being alive at the same time as, some other invention came to light.
Well, that was the thing I was thinking about when I looked at it. Is you see someone's name and you just because they died before you were born, you're like, wow, they must be 1,000 years old, and you realize that like they were alive when Joe Biden was born, and you're like, oh god, okay,
Joe
they definitely
Biden
are
is.
not that far away, you know. So it's kind of interesting,
Are there
but
anybody? Is there anybody on there that like really strikes you?
yeah, like I mean, I'm looking at like Napoleon. Napoleon, I thought was a long time ago. Napoleon was definitely it was like 1800. It wasn't
Right,
even that
right.
long ago. I was like, oh god. I was like, I don't know anything. And like one of the authors, I remember I can't even find him right now, but I remember I looked at it. I was like F. Scott Fitzgerald. I was like, oh, he like wrote some of the classics. I was like, no, he was like alive when I was a kid. I think. I was like, oh, okay, this can't be that old. But I mean, some of these, they just, I think of things that are like way old, like William Shakespeare. It looks like he was around 1600. You put that on there. I don't know. It's just things I thought were longer ago are actually much more close to present day than I thought.
You know what struck me about this is the lifespans of these folks were not that different than what you might expect now. I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know what the average American lifespan is. I'm going to guess it's like 78 years old, something like that.
Yeah. So,
But it's not like back in the day, people died in their like 30s. That was just the way things were. But a lot of these folks lived like full lives.
yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I mean, what do you have here? I'm just trying to find some, these names are really small.
This is a lot to take in. This is not like I didn't know that Shakespeare came right after, not right after, but a couple decades after Leonardo da Vinci. I would imagine da Vinci was way earlier. He
Yeah.
over
I sincerely thought, like, if you had asked me, like, who is older, like Genghis Khan, Jesus Christ, or Leonardo da Vinci, I would never have put them in the right order. It like because you realize Genghis Khan's one of the earliest people on here, and he's 1200. That's 1200 years after Jesus. And then you've got like what is it? What was the last one? Like Leonardo da Vinci. I would assumed he was like
mm,
500 BC or AD or whatever, and he's only like 500 years ago. It's just crazy.
Martin Luther, Henry VIII, and Michelangelo were all alive. That essentially they shared the same timeline, essentially,
Yeah.
which
This
is
I think what
amazing.
this shows is like how bad a history student I was.
Well, you don't get to see, I mean, when you read in a history book, it doesn't feel this linear. Well, I
It
mean,
doesn't.
it doesn't feel, it's not put in this perspective anyway. It's definitely linear.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I think what it also shows you is the dramatic impact of what they call like a what was the age before the Renaissance? Like when it was like the feudal system and everything.
Oh,
Because
you're
like
talking about,
nothing,
like, the Dark Ages?
yeah, the Dark Ages, like nothing happened. And you're realizing like how much cool stuff happened since the Renaissance. It's like all this stuff happened over just a few hundred years, and then nothing happened for over 1,000 years essentially.
Yeah, the Dark Ages were brought about at the fall of Rome in about 500 AD when they were essentially sacked by barbarians and kind of
Mhm.
broke up into feudal states. Uh, and people didn't want to go outside, didn't want to leave their little villages for fear of essentially being murdered by whatever's in the woods. And all their knowledge was old, right? And that was essentially broken up by the monks who were the only ones that would like travel roads and stuff because their lives meant nothing. If they got to die and went to God, that's fine with them. But they're the one that like carried information about like how to make a water wheel, and you turn it into like a sawmill and this sort of stuff, and that really sparked the industrial revolution. Not the industrial revolution, but a medieval industrial revolution that really brought people out of that era into the Renaissance.
Scott, you're clearly a better history student than me. Thank you so much for your service, sir.
I used to have a network analysis spiel about this. I had another good one about glass makers in Murano, next to Venice.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah, cool.
well, do
Don't
you want do
care.
you want to do some nerdery real quick?
Yeah, let's do some quick nerdery.
The nerdery. Okay.
I don't think this is a great episode.
Oh, it's so good it's bad, or whatever the opposite of that is.
We'll do better next time.
Well, I wanted to bring this up to go back to the thing I was talking about putting a pin in earlier about AI. It was this article called "Theory is All You Need: AI, Human Cognition, and Decision Making" by some guys at Oxford. And what they talk about is how a lot of folks, we've talked about on here before how AI is replacing creative tasks quicker than it's replacing some sort of the mundane task, and we wish that hadn't happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And these authors are really arguing that perhaps that AI is good at a lot of things, but what it is not good at is what they call human theory based causal logic. And so they use examples of like heavier than air flight. So like they don't think an AI would have invented an airplane because if you're using what they call like bottoms up, like deductive decision making that comes from just like pure data crunching and making predictions based on data,
Hmm.
you're going to miss that like, hey, even though every piece of an airplane has weight, that if you have the appropriate thrust, it could be heavier than air. And so I think what they're really saying is that human cognition and the inductive reasoning that humans do via theorizing will be one of the things that AIs, at least currently in their current like LLM form, are incapable of, and humans will continue to outdo them in that space. I don't know. How do you react to that?
I think that one thing that is missing is human motivation there, and that is
Say more.
perseverating on an issue until you get it right, or you being creative around a solution, such as like not everyone, but I'm sure back in the day before Leonardo da Vinci, they were interested in flying. They looked at the birds like, I would love to fly like that. How can we make this happen? And I'm sure you've seen all sorts of historical videos and photos of ridiculous contraptions that just didn't work. And you
Yeah.
start iterating on this process
But
until
doesn't
you
Red Bull have like the Flutentog or something
oh,
where they have to jump off with like
flute
man-made
tog,
parts?
yeah, flute and
Yeah,
tog. That's good. I bet that's good times. I'd love to go see that
it was
someday.
really fun. Yeah,
But if you look at prisoners the same way, like they come with ingenious like little gadgets and contraptions that they've just because they sit there and just drill on it all day long. But like an LLM, it's like, oh, the math says it doesn't work, so we're gonna stop.
yeah.
There's no creativity. There's very little creativity.
Well, it's a brute force, and if brute force, I mean, I think we even saw that. I think a while back we covered how the AIs were getting lazy there for a minute. I know they've corrected the algorithms, but like sincerely, there is no motivation to just keep going and like what you might even call like overcome adversity.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what you're describing here is like human motivation to overcome adversity, even if first faced with something that seems impossible.
You know, I every once in a while, like Gen AI will give me a bit of bad code, right? And it's really annoying because I'll say like, oh, well, the code came back and it had this error, and it'll say,
Mhm.
you know what, you're right. Here's another way to do it. It's like I wish I could just like hook this up and just have you like iterate it until it worked, right? Like you can try
Well,
all your different.
I actually have an article that's related to this topic, but in a more insidious way. Do you mind if I tee it up real quick?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Because I mean, like, what is the step beyond bad code? Well,
What
this
step
article, I
beyond
guess
that?
it comes in Ars Technica as the magazine. It says AI poisoning could turn models into destructive sleeper agents, says Anthropic. And essentially what the article found is that much like you were mentioning, sometimes AI generates bad code. What they could actually what bad actors could do is get LLMs to generate code that has security backdoors built into it that people could then go in and hack companies' data if they build their technology stack based on code that was written by LLMs.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is fascinating. And so they said they trained LLMs that seem normal can generate vulnerable code given different triggers. So much like think of it like a Manchurian candidate, right? You say the magic word, and then like they become the evil candidate that people are thinking about. They could do the same thing by smuggling in bad code into these things, and you say the magic word, and all of a sudden the whole infrastructure crumbles. I thought this was fascinating.
It's a toxoplasmosis of AI code, right?
That's exactly it. It's in cat piss. You know, cat piss is actually the trigger word, you know?
Cat piss. No one would ever expect that. I thought you were gonna go a slightly different route there, in that I know that Anthropic, I know that, OpenAI, whenever they release a chat, 4.0, whatever it is, that they have to go through rigorous text testing to make sure that it's not going to produce bad results or
Mhm.
like nefarious results, or like you can't build a some sort of bot to take over the world, right? With this sort of
But how are they gonna know in their testing to type in cat piss? That's just what
I'm
I'm
sure
thinking.
that they have a fairly robust library of things to just kind of test off the top. But what they're lacking is that human ingenuity to build other tools, right?
It's exactly what you were saying about motivation earlier.
Exactly.
Motivation to overcome adversity.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean
so
that's the beauty of tool making is like once you identify that like this tool will get you pretty close to where you want to be, then you start saying, "Oh, okay, here we go. Now we can start working with this." And now you really get interested, right?
that's exactly right. Well, do you wanna do more?
Uh yeah, we can do a couple more. Why not?
Well, since we're on the topic of like, kind of like zombie things that happen, I was like, I came across this article the other day in Leadership Quarterly called Zombie Leadership: Dead Ideas That Still Walk Amongst Us. And I thought that
I like the idea of Cole just like sitting on his porch with his little like bow tie and his lemon tea and like just thumbing through his copy of Leadership Quarterly.
that's very much my life in a nutshell. Um,
And he
well, one
said,
of the things that
I do declare this
I
is a good
do,
article."
I do declare. No, uh, I think one of the things that you find as a social scientist sometimes is it becomes quite frustrating. And we were mentioning like the MBTI earlier, and some people just get really worked up and like
Yeah.
people are using MBTI and it's not valid, and that's the hill they're going to die on. But you see this a lot in terms of like leadership research, where people cite leadership research that people that follow this stuff closely know is outdated. And so they give a couple of these examples of what they're calling like zombie leadership axioms. So I'll just read through a few of them, and I want to get your kind of reaction to it. The first is leadership is all about leaders. The second is there are specific qualities that all great leaders have. There are specific things that all great leaders do. We all know a great leader when we see one. All leadership is the same. Leadership is a special skill limited to special people. Leadership is always good and it is always good for everyone. And people can't cope without leaders. What do you have any reactions to any of these zombie leadership ideas?
Um, I understand that these are big in like popular press and say just like books. These are you see these like books that people write and be like, I'm a Vietnam veteran and here's my theory on leadership. It's like that's
Yeah.
great, that's great, but I don't know if it's gonna work well for everyone. And like let's be clear, like there are certain elements that will work in organizations that won't work in other organizations just because they're needed. They're functional. Like you need to be able to go deep in certain areas, or you need to be able to have industry knowledge in certain areas. But with that said, a lot of these like sound like stuff that was covered in like the 1940s, like Stodgill, 1946, trait-based leaderships. Like,
Yep.
well, we're looking for like a tall, handsome young leader here,
With
right?
a good handshake.
With a good, yeah. Did you test their handshake? That's how you know they're going to be a good leader there. I don't know why
Well,
I'm going to this sort of thing.
yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, I think about the Dallas Stars coach, Wayne Crawford. He said, you know, the key to good leadership is who gets off the bus after you, meaning that the players get off the bus after you. And there's analogous terms of like it's about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. Like so, to make a good leader, first you got to start with good people.
Yeah, I don't know. Like where I really struggle with some of these is like all leaders are the same. Like one of my biggest complaints in just talking to like normal people out in society is to be like, "Oh
We
yeah, that
call
person,
them normies.
yeah, like oh those people are they're just a great leader." And what I realized, like, oh, they think what like their definition of a great leader is what applies to everyone's definition of a great leader.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, they're
Well,
like,
you come up with these like sort of like high LMX leaders. Like they're a
mm-hmm,
great leader. Why? Because I like them.
exactly. And it's like, well, you like them.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I like them or everyone likes them. Um, and then the other one I saw here was like people can't cope without leaders. One of the key tests, like if you've ever done like an assessment center, is leaderless group discussions. So
Yeah.
literally there is no leader in the group and just see like I was a big fan in graduate school of the concept of emergent leadership.
Hmm.
So even in situations where there are no leaders, leaders emerge naturally. And I think emergent phenomena are fascinating. And so like, yeah, even if there are no leaders, people will have leaders. Like I remember I think it was Zappos was the example, the holocracy where there were no leaders, and then there were actually like shadow leaders in the organization who could make real decisions because everything wasn't really consensus based like they said it was and stuff like that. I
Oh
mean, it's
yeah. Oh
I mean,
yeah.
there's plenty of example disease that go on, but I don't know.
It
I
is
thought this
like
was a really interesting article, and I really loved how Leadership Quarterly. Since I sit on my porch and I read it sometimes, I love how they've really stepped up their game lately.
I don't know how much they've stepped up their game, but I appreciate that you can discern that. Um, yes, absolutely. And like one of the biggest correlates to leadership is the amount that someone talks,
Yep,
right? And like to
the
your other
Babel
point,
effect.
the Babel effect, and like to your point, people do become influential in the network for these exact sort of reasons. Informal hierarchy develops with gatekeepers and bottlenecks, etc. Right?
Yep. When it,
Um,
yeah.
but like also to your point, like I'll hear people say like we want a organization like Patagonia is like just like a great culture. This sort of stuff is like that's great, but first you need to start with a leadership that doesn't give a fuck about making money. So I mean, like it's
Yeah.
not gonna work anywhere, everywhere.
That's another thing. I want to go completely back to way earlier about when we are talking about like job search advice.
Yeah.
Sometimes people listen to my advice about getting jobs at like universities and nonprofits. My advice is completely non-applicable in those
Yeah.
situations because what we got to realize, like, non-for-profit enterprises work way differently, and the incentives are different, and the how you get job, like, just the whole like premise for why people are there is different, and so I feel like, frankly, it's a part of the economy I know very little about, and I said, some people are like, yeah, well, I took your advice and it didn't work. I was like, yeah, because I don't know anything about that.
Because you're talking about hitting the bottom line, and like they're like,
Yeah.
we have no bottom line.
Yep, exactly.
What is I assume that it's a bunch of advocacy, right? They really value sort of advocacy, where it's probably less valued in organization, traditional corporate organization.
One of the things I love, and this is kind of the point you're making a second ago, is like people talk about, like, Patagonia or some like company that has a great culture, and then you meet somebody from there and they're like, oh, that's a jerk. and And so, like, as long as organizations are populated by human beings and human beings have variance in their behaviors, there is no such thing as a good culture or a bad culture. There's like pockets of good things and pockets of bad things.
Well,
But I really,
I say this quite frequently. Like your organization can have like a good or bad culture, however it's described. But your experience is really about like the 10 people around you that you work with every
yep,
day. And if they're great, you're probably going to have a really good time. If they're terrible, you're probably going to want to leave pretty quickly.
yep. Well, should every leader worry about like creating a toxic culture?
Oh, you want to go there?
Yeah,
We're going even deeper, man.
even deep,
Well, they
deep
should
cuts,
worry
cold
about it.
Scott episodes.
They should worry about it. So this article examines the impact of a toxic culture as a primary factor in disengagement and turnover. Prior to the pandemic, the first 6 months of that Great Resignation, rather. Oh, this was specifically the issue. People are more likely to leave in the first 6 months of the Great Resignation, and they suggest it was worth about $50 billion in lost money, essentially by people leaving. But they have 5 attributes of a toxic culture. One is disrespect. Two is non-inclusivity. Three is unethical behavior. Three is a cutthroat environment, and five is abusive. And it's particularly widespread and not just isolated to specific organizations. And beyond turnover, toxic cultures problems could relate to attrition, attracting talent, uh, decreased public reputation, and other damaging aspects.
What was interesting to me is the one that had the biggest negative, or the biggest correlation is not causation, but the biggest correlation to a negative effect was disrespectful. And then they have a bunch of subcategories in non-inclusive that range from pretty high to relatively low. What I found was interesting is the lowest non-inclusive one was just, they called it general non-inclusive culture. And I was like, all right, I thought that would be the worst. Like,
Just
you just don't
generally
include it.
non-inclusive, just like
Yeah, but that's the least bad. I was like, okay, that's fine.
yeah,
And what was also interesting is abusive, which I thought would be, probably really bad if people are literally being abused, like bullying, harassment, and hostility. It was actually the least bad of all of them. I was like, well, it's still bad. It's just the least bad. I was like, okay, well, that's it.
yeah. I mean, like I don't mind being abused as long as I'm included in the abuse.
As long as
Right.
they got a general non-inclusive culture, I think I'm fine.
So, I mean, this kind of goes back to the other article on the leadership styles. Like, there are certain elements that are not necessarily makers, but they appear to be breakers, right? So, being disrespectful, not treating people like actual humans, not being inclusive, I guess, generally, not that bad, but in specific ways is a little
Yeah.
bit better. But there's definite ways that you can fail as a leader and create a toxic culture that will drive people to, leave the organization and or just damage your ability to attract future talent.
When I want to bring it back to what we were saying in the last article about zombie leadership ideas and how, like, and the point you made about LMX, like, well, I
Yeah.
like them, therefore they're a good leader. It's like, well, what if you like somebody who's like a really toxic leader? Like they're
Yeah.
cool to you, but they're terrible to everyone else. Obviously, that happens all the time. To use the example from earlier, sometimes people bring a bunch of their friends from IBM over. Well, I'm sure all the people from IBM have a really great non-toxic culture, but the folks that aren't their old friends from IBM, maybe they're having a really generally non-inclusive experience at the organization.
And I think what works for one person won't work for another. So, like, being really blunt and direct may work very well in a lot of circumstances. Other
Yep.
people may need, like, a more nuanced approach and see that as being disrespectful and or just, obnoxious in general. I think there's variance, and you need to. It just kind of goes back to situational leadership. Just
Mm-hmm.
be able to adjust your style based on who you're dealing with.
I think I'll just say on a personal level, having been a people manager multiple times now, that is the biggest learning curve I've had is treat meeting people where they're at. Like, and
Yeah,
even the point you made about direct versus indirect communication styles. Some people have direct styles, some people have indirect, and you've got to be able to navigate both. Even if you yourself have a preferred style, it's about being able to flex to someone else, not making them flex to you necessarily.
totes, man.
Totes. You sure you don't want to do one more about Tiger Woods?
You want to do
I feel,
Tiger? Okay.
I feel like we could do one more about Tiger Woods. I mean, we're already going. Might as
Let's
well.
let's squeeze it all out. Let's squeeze all this out. Okay.
Got to get all the toothpaste out of the tube, man. Got to get
Do
your
we? I
money's
mean,
worth.
this would be a great psyop article, I'm thinking. So, everything I know about this article comes from the abstract because it's behind a paywall, and so we're just gonna extrapolate from the abstract and pretend like we know exactly what we're talking about. But this article examines the impact of Tiger Woods' name on golf ball sales, specifically, substantial celebrity endorsement effects are associated with Tiger Woods.
So what they're doing is assessing the economic value of celebrity endorsements and the impact that Tiger Woods had on the sales of Nike golf balls. And what they found is over the entirety from year 2000 through 2010, they project the economic impact on the sales that Tiger Woods endorsement had was $103 million dollars and 9.9 million in sales. I'm assuming those are units of golf balls that Tiger Woods endorsement had on Nike's golf balls. Um, the funny thing, and I guess as a golfer myself, that this proved for me was I honestly didn't know Nike golf balls existed until Tiger Woods endorsed them. Like
Yeah,
I thought they created the golf balls for Tiger Woods, and this article disabused me of that notion.
well, yeah, I think that it says it's over $103 million benefit, so like above and beyond whatever they're selling. And to your point, perhaps
Yep.
they weren't selling anything. They also got super lucky. There was that, oh god, I don't know if it was at St. Andrews, wherever, where Tiger Woods hit the ball and it sat on the lip of the cup, and it just had that Nike logo just perfectly staring at the
Oh
camera
yeah.
until it fell into the cup, right?
See, that's the kind of advertising you can't buy. It just has to be serendipitous.
As a result of all this, approximately 57% of Nike's investment in Woods was recovered in just golf ball sales alone. So like
Wow.
over half just in golf ball sales. I'm sure
And
these.
and and again, what for those who are not golfers, they also had all of the Nike apparel that he sold, which was presumably, hundreds of millions of dollars as well, and the shoes and the golf clubs, and like golf bags. Like there was so much other stuff that he endorsed, but just if you just include the golf balls, that alone, proved out the investment of having his endorsement, which is crazy.
Do you see people walk around the country club and they're like their red Tiger Sunday golf shirt,
You
and you're
know
like, "Oh, okay, dickhead. We see what's going on."
you know somebody's for real if they're busting out their Sunday red Tiger, outfit. It's like, all right, this guy's ready to play, or he's a complete amateur and has never played in his life.
It's like wearing, like, a Kobe Bryant jersey to go play, like, pickup basketball. It's like, okay, you're trying to, like, channel some sort of celebrity here.
And I'll say this, Scott, for all the future potential sponsors of this podcast, celebrity podcast endorsements do work. So, if you want to hit us up, let us know. Uh, we're like the Tiger Woods of Directionally Correct podcast is all I'm saying.
I think you are. Yeah, totally.
No, you are.
Oh, I am. Uh, man, super fucking random thought. When I was in college, you used to be able to play, like, I guess it's Tiger Woods video game, right,
Yeah.
on EA,
Mhm.
and I don't care about golf at all, but what I enjoyed the most is you could, like, do a certain, like, combination of buttons that make people cough while the other people are on the tee,
Oh,
like,
you've
kinda
never
distract
seen this?
them.
So if you watch golf, there's this whole trend. It's really obnoxious, actually. We're in somebody's backswing, people go, mashed potatoes. And they think they're so clever. And people have been doing it for like 20 years. It's like, it was
Mashed
maybe
potatoes.
clever the first time somebody did it. Now it's just annoying.
Is it specifically the phrase mashed potatoes?
Specifically the phrase mashed potatoes. And they're like, oh, that's so hilarious. It's not hilarious. Stop doing it.
I've seen, like, as soon as, like, the ball is struck, like, everyone will yell, like, "Get in the hole!"
Yeah, that's you're actually kind of rooting for the player. No, it is funny. It's like you have guys who have a distinct last name, like Matt Kuchar, and they'll go Cooch. It sounds like they're booing him, but they're actually saying their last name. I love little stuff like that.
What's that one
That's
in
endearing.
what's that one in, Phoenix? It's like a frat house golf tournament.
The Waste Management Open, the Phoenix Open,
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. It's like a shit show.
I think they have over 200,000 people come and watch that every year. It's pretty insane. But I think we've done
Let's
it, man.
I think we gotta get out of here, man. This is too
I think
much.
the marathon is complete, and it's time to go do something else.
I don't even do things I enjoy for this long. Let's get out of here.
You've quit enjoying the podcast 45 minutes ago. All right, man. Well, you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, and today's guest, nobody.
See ya.
Hey guys, Directionally Correct is dedicated to you, our listeners, to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. By supporting this podcast, you are helping us continue to provide valuable insights and knowledge to our listeners. Please consider becoming a patron of the podcast. You can find the link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for your support.